it's, truly magnificent to see, okay, now that people are recognizing in the Western world that this works. But our way of diagnosing is so different because it's not compartmentalized. Sometimes it's hard to really grasp, okay, this is what Chinese medicine is about. It's very individualistic. But when you put it into a Western paradigm, yes, it runs in parallels, but it makes sense. But sometimes it doesn't. But I think people are open to it. Western doctors understand it is beneficial and it helps. And I think the true goal is to help patients and people, and we're at that stage. And so I'm grateful.
This is the Home of Health Span podcast, where we profile health and wellness role models, sharing their stories and the tools, practices, and routines they use to live a lively life.
Hi, Felice. So nice to meet you, and welcome to the Home of Health Span podcast. Really interested to hear all about the different ways that acupuncture can help with longevity, hit all the 5 pillars that we're going to talk about. But getting started, wanting to talk about that recovery aspect of acupuncture and kind of how you see that fit into people's regimens and even your own personal life.
Absolutely. So nice to meet you, Taylor and Andrew. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I love acupuncture. It's a journey that I started a while ago and something that I find so beneficial for my patients, especially for recovery. When you think about what acupuncture does, it really increases the blood flow, and we say the qi flow in Chinese medicine, to increase recovery. And there's an ancient saying that says that if there's stagnation, there's pathologies. But if there's no stagnations, that's when you have the ultimate health and your body as at homeostasis and at balanced, and therefore your recovery can peak. And so with acupuncture needles, they essentially, break through the skin. We choose certain points and certain meridians to activate a flow of qi and blood in the body to the way that the practitioner chooses. For example, if someone comes in with back pain and, or comes in with a sore back or glutes after a workout, that's where we will target. However, we also add points on the hands, on the feet, on the head, because channels run from head to toe. And so it's the needles that are elsewhere in the body that creates this flow and the qi of flow in blood that really impacts recovery and makes it beneficial.
How did you start in acupuncture? I mean, was it something kind of growing up did you do as a patient, or how did you come to it?
Yeah, so interestingly, I grew up in Hong Kong. So Chinese medicine was more so part of my household and my health, but I actually never got acupuncture until I moved to the United States post-college. It was introduced to my partner then, and I was actually in Western medicine for most of my life. I shadowed doctors as a kid. I studied neuroscience in college, also studied pre-med, and that was the trajectory I went into. And post-college, that's when I had, my almost spiritual awakening and understanding of what holistic health means and the importance of preventative health. And that's why I took a shift. I did a 180 shift to Chinese medicine, really got back to my roots. It was very special to me, and that's how I started the journey.
You say getting back to your roots and then kind of the Western versus Chinese medicine. Yeah. It seems like so much, the more we learn in Western medicine, the more we start to learn the mechanisms about why Chinese medicine, or some of the Asian philosophers, this is why, that actually does work. But because we didn't understand it before, we said it didn't work. But now we understand why it does work. Where are we on that with the qi? Because we do have these pressure points. We do have, whether it's lymph nodes, other things that they can get blocked, and we need to release or get those things flowing. And that is a crucial part of health that could be driven physically. It could be driven mentally, that manifests physically. That they're all different ways to do that. Where are we in terms of better understanding the core mechanisms driving the impact from acupuncture?
Of course. There's actually quite a lot of research in the past decade that really shows that acupuncture does work, and it's so beneficial for the body. And it's interesting because when you think about Western science, it's very much compartmentalized, to systems in the body, whether it's the heart, the lungs, different organs, the minds. But Chinese medicine connects it all together. But with research that's going on, we are able to see what mechanisms that the brain drives, for example, what neurotransmitters are released when you put in certain needles, what hormones are released, or even what, antihistamine pathways in the IL system in the, gut is turned on when certain needles are put in. So it's very interesting to see that, okay, now science and the way that we, in the Western science breaks down research papers finally make sense in the Eastern pathology. And, and I'm grateful for that. But it's truly running in parallels. And sometimes it's hard to really grasp, okay, this is what Chinese medicine is about. It's very individualistic. But when you put it into a Western paradigm, and especially research studies, you're just like, okay, you see 50 people, they're all getting the same points. And this is what happens. However, in reality, 50 people are not getting the same points because everyone is different. We all have different emotions. We all have, different environmental factors, lifestyle, background, whatever it is. So yes, it's, truly magnificent to see, okay, now that people are recognizing in the Western world that this works, or certain, acupuncture is great for certain pathologies, whether it's infertility, for neuropathy, for Parkinson's, whatever it is. But our way of diagnosing is so different because it's not compartmentalized. So, it's almost like an intertwining. Yes, it runs in parallels, but it makes sense, but sometimes it doesn't. But I think people are open to it. Western doctors understand it is beneficial and it helps. And I think the true goal is to help patients and people, and we're at that stage. And so I'm grateful.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, that point about like the harmonization between like Chinese and Western medicine. My first experience with acupuncture was actually coming downstairs to see my mom, who had multiple sclerosis. She had a lesion on her ocular nerve and was blind for 6 months. And she got acupuncture. She'd be laying on her couch because she couldn't go anywhere every single day. And that combined with like a low inflammation diet and like using steroids when necessary helped her sight come back when they told her, you might be wearing an eye patch for the rest of your life. So like, it's really, and that was when I was very young. So like, I feel like the jump, like, do you find a lot of your patients that you're seeing or the people you're working with, are they kind of taking that approach of like, I want to take that, individual leap and find that like tailored thing for myself to help whatever they're dealing with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting because most people get introduced to acupuncture through pain or recovery, and they come into the clinic and they realize, oh, wow, acupuncture is a holistic medicine and it helps with A, B, and C symptoms as well. I'm like, absolutely. And so then we start to target, their chief complaints or their main concerns. And that's how they start the journey with acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And they start to make it more of their lifestyle and their routine. And they realize it's also preventative health. It helps prevent any cardiovascular issues. It helps prevent brain fog. It helps prevent inflammation in the body, but also can target that at the same time. It's really beautiful. And every protocol is very much specific to the person. And it's not just acupuncture. It's also Chinese herbs. It's a lifestyle. It's, Chinese nutrition therapy, even stretching. I have some background in yoga therapy. And so understanding how to open parts of the body where they can continue their journey outside the clinic at home is also really important.
Yeah, on that, I mean, you talked about a lot of people, their entry point is when there's a problem. They go and they start addressing this. But there's a separate piece here, which is living with vitality and high energy all the time, that maybe you don't realize that there's a problem because every day you're at 30%, or maybe you're at 70% of what you could feel like and be. For you, knowing this, and then obviously having your patients, you go, what is your kind of week to week or month to month? How frequently do you go in and see someone and try to say, okay, here's kind of what's going on with me. Here's what I need today.
Of course. Personally, I crave acupuncture all the time. If I could get acupuncture with my schedule and time, I would get it 2 to 3 times a week. Okay. That is ideal. I probably go about, once a week or biweekly, just as almost as a tune-up for myself. I generally think I'm, very healthy. From a Western standpoint, there's nothing wrong with my health. But from an Eastern standpoint, there's some imbalances that I'm just like, oh, I have cold hand, cold feet. Like, I know exactly what's going on. This can be addressed, but it's not causing any detrimental effects that Western medicine keys, and I'm just like, oh, I might have, some blurry vision at nighttime. Why is that? It's little symptoms that we learn in Chinese medicine that means that our body is imbalanced. And sometimes it's a blessing in disguise because I'm like, oh, I know exactly what's going on with my health and my body. But sometimes I could just be like, oh my goodness, there's so many little small things. But in reality, there's nothing wrong with me.
On the cold hands, cold feet, just very selfishly, like what is that? Because I have super cold hands, cold feet.
Yeah, happy to share. So from a Western medicine perspective, it's all about circulation, right? It's about blood getting to the hands and feet. But in Chinese medicine, there's different root causes. But one of the main causes we say is a liver qi stagnation, meaning that we have a qi and blood stagnation in the center of our body. That's where our liver is located, but also our liver is in charge of emotions such as anger, frustration, and stress. And so when we can't move that free flow of qi in the center of our body, which is in charge or, taken charge by the liver, everything is stuck in the center. And so the flow of energy in our body can't reach your hands and feet. So interestingly, there are amazing points to activate that. But also, if you want to take charge of your own health, just breathing into the diaphragm, activating that movement in the center of your body is all you really need.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting. I know all the people in my life who have like circulation issues. I'm like, they're pretty stressed. Like that really just connected something. Yeah. I need to tell them to deep breathe. It'll fix everything.
Yeah, that belly breathing.
Yeah, belly breathing and making sure you're activating the diaphragm, and it's activated, for more than 5 minutes a day, because when we breathe, we truly aren't breathing into the diaphragm. We're not aware of that.
So that on recovery, is there anything, and sleep side, is there anything else you do other than, you mentioned some yoga that you'll do kind of on the stretching, opening parts of the body up. What is your recovery routine?
Yeah, absolutely. My recovery routine, I think I really emphasize a nighttime and morning routine. So before bedtime, I think it's so important to get off electronics, to ground myself with a book or mindfulness, whether it's journaling or breathing. I have my red light therapy lamp that I love. Yeah, and a combination of slowing down, of grounding myself is so important for recovery, and that primes a good night's sleep. I've never had trouble sleeping, and I'm so thankful for that. But sleep is where your body truly detoxes from a Chinese medicine perspective and Western perspective. And in Chinese medicine, we have certain organs that are functioning at night, such as the gallbladder, the liver, the lungs. And because the liver in both medicines is the center of detoxification, we need to be in bed by 11 o'clock. And when you're in bed by 11 o'clock, that's when your body can truly process, detox, and rest. And that's when our balance of yin and yang in Chinese medicine is able to recalibrate itself for the next day.
Okay. On sleep, do you have anything specific you do around that? Do you wear eye masks, blackout curtains, like anything kind of ensuring you get a great night's sleep?
I'm someone who's always been lucky where I can sleep if I need to sleep. Recently, if I'm more stressed, I do take magnesium at night. I prefer magnesium glycinate or a tri-magnesium blend. I don't do it daily. It's more so if I'm more elevated and I feel like my nervous system is out of whack, that's when I take it before bed. And I do truly feel the benefits of it, though I don't like being dependent on any supplements. I think supplements are amazing, but no one should be really taking them year long. It should be, for a certain amount of time to prime your body back into balance, and your body should start to naturally develop those supplements in your body afterwards.
Do you just read your own body on that, or do you do any kind of blood work to try to check on things like that?
Yeah. So personally, I read my body on it. I also run a lot of lab tests in my clinic, and that's how I help with patients to understand their baseline. But for me, I think because I'm pretty in tune with my body, I can tell when my B vitamins are low. I can tell when my vitamin C is low, or when I need more probiotics in my gut. It's taken a lot of time of training and intuition and understanding the body from an Eastern perspective to really get to the nitty gritty of it.
I've seen some supplement companies, advertise a product as like a Chinese medicine therapy. Are there like any specific like Chinese medicine herbs or like teas or something like that you would recommend to someone to like promote recovery or blood flow or anything for sleep?
For sleep, yes. There's two main, we say, patented formulas in Chinese medicine that I use myself. Sometimes one of them is called a swanzar the other is gui pi tang. And it's very dependent on your pathology. And a lot of times, especially women who can't sleep at night, it's sometimes due to, we say, a blood deficiency. It almost can be, 1-to-1 to anemia, but not the anemic level per blood test in a Western standpoint. Because women have menstrual cycles every month, and you bleed every month, and you lose blood, but we aren't taught how to replenish it. And so when you have a deficiency, or, you're at this baseline before your period and now you're down here, sometimes people can have a deficiency when it comes to nighttime, where the blood, which is our vital yin, can't really hold at night. And therefore you have the insomnia, you have the heat that rises, you have this imbalance that's caused. And so, for example, that's a swanzar intang. formula that I would give my patients. And there's another one called Gui Pi Tong, and it's a little bit more different about the heart and the spleen. So it's about palpitations that you feel at night, or even a spleen qi weakness. And the spleen is very much tied to digestion, to what you put in your body, to making sure that you eat warm and nourishing foods, but also it's tied to overwhelming thoughts and overthinking. And so people who are working a lot, students who are studying a lot, they're always spleen qi deficient. And so when you give them these formulas at night, they're able to replenish and they're able to sleep through the night. And it's wonderful.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Again, I mean, like we talked before, there's one of treating the symptom once there is a problem, right? So this is kind of on the back end. Hey, you're running into this issue. If we could jump over to kind of mindset and stress management, are there preventative practices, protocols, any things that you're using or you recommend to your patients to say, hey, we can do this now to address the problem, but ongoing, here's maybe the thing to be trying to do day to day?
Yeah, a day-to-day preventative, it's always about lifestyle, and it's the nuances of how you lead your life. It's more so slowing down. It's making sure you're practicing a mindfulness exercise, whether in Chinese medicine, I love qigong. I love Tai Chi. It's slower. It grounds you. It moves the qi in your body in such a healthy way. I always recommend that, slower movements. And if people aren't familiar with Tai Chi or Qigong, yoga is also amazing as a preventative way to make sure that all the meridians are balanced and everything's free flowing in the body. And in terms of teas, every day I drink chrysanthemum tea and chamomile tea at nighttime, because chrysanthemum in Chinese medicine perspective is an herb that targets the liver. It detoxes the liver. It's very cooling. It's anti-inflammatory. And it's something I used to drink as a kid all the time after dim sum, because naturally it is cooling and dim sum's usually hot. So it does the opposite. I love it.
All right. I'm going to go out and get some chrysanthemum tea today. I got to check this out. And then, so that's on things you would consume. What about kind of lifestyle behavioral? You mentioned some journaling. Are there other things around meditation, anything like that you do or you recommend they try?
Yes. Something that I do daily, it's a non-negotiable for me, is breath work. Meditation is hard for a lot of people because, I think there's almost a mindset of, oh my gosh, I can't meditate. I'm not able to focus for a certain amount of time. I'm not able to shut my brain off. But truly, meditation isn't about shutting your brain off, but about awareness of what your thoughts are and how it makes your bodies feel and the emotion that you feel when you are quiet. And so breath work is almost easier, where you're focusing on breath. You're focusing on pushing this air down into your diaphragm, which then activates your vagus nerve. And your vagus nerve is so important for your nervous system regulation. It's how you switch from a sympathetic to a parasympathetic. And so something that I will let my patients know is, if you can, spend at least 5 minutes a day and do breath work. Whether it's, box breathing, slow breathing, deep breathing, fire breath, whatever breathing exercise you like, do it.
Do you give them, is it YouTube videos, or how would they learn about the different ones to see what clicks with them?
Yeah. When I have patients in clinic, I always like to start my treatments with just a few rounds of breath into the belly. And I like to put my hand on their belly and I like to see that their belly expands. Because most of the time when I say breathe into your belly, a lot of people don't really know what that feels. And so it takes them a little bit of time. So I'm like, this is the breath that you want to start to breathe. Like, this is the most basic breath. And you can start there. And if not, I will do some breathing exercises with them and show them, or I send them YouTube videos.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in the same vein, are there things that you can do as like a acupuncture practitioner? Like, I know I've struggled with shallow breathing. Are there ways that you can open up, tightness, or knowing a lot of that breathing is also connected to in different ways, chakras and traumas and stuff like that? Do you have ways to aid people in that through your treatments?
Absolutely. So again, everyone's individualistic, and the reason why they aren't deep breathing or breathing to the diaphragm is tied to so many different factors. And for example, I will either put in acupuncture needles in the arms, the legs, the head, wherever is necessary. And those points will activate a flow of qi into the chest. So for example, there's one on the wrist. This is called pericardium 6, and it opens up the chest. And so this point, when someone's having, a stagnation or stuckness or anxiety in their chest, once this point is kind of activated, whether it's from acupressure massage or a needle, they almost feel an expansive opening. And so breathing is so much easier for them. Something I also like to before or after a treatment is someone's diaphragm. And so if you kind of put your hands on someone's rib cage, in the beginning of the treatment, it's always a little bit narrow. One side will be, closer to the middle or the center or the other. And that's indicative of, okay, that side has more imbalance happening. And there's certain points that I'll put on the toes, the hands, that will open back up and open their breath. And naturally, at the end of their treatment, after the 30 minutes of needles, their diaphragm starts to elevate again, and it opens up. And so that's a key indication for me that, okay, they're breathing again. Everything is back to normal for, the next few days before they need to come in again.
So there's something they're doing or that's happening in their environment that's getting back to a suboptimal point.
Correct.
Are you able to work with them and identify what that is so they can start addressing those triggers or whatever it is that's causing these imbalances and the problems?
Yeah, so absolutely, but in both ways, both in clinic and out of clinic. It's interesting because acupuncture is an accumulative effect. Chinese medicine is accumulative. It's not a one and done shop. Right. You go in once and you're fixed. It has to be, a certain protocol where you come in once or twice a week for, 1 or 2 months to really address the core issue. And then you can start to taper off. It's because they come in with a lowered baseline. And in order to get them to a higher baseline and to stay there, the acupuncture treatments need to accumulate, and it needs to, kind of prime the body to fire the neurotransmitters, the opioids, whatever is needed to rebalance their body. And so that's what is done in clinic with the acupuncture needles. And it's so powerful in itself. And when patients go home, that's where I suggest the food therapy, the lifestyle therapy, the breathing, the yoga, and whatever they can actually take in their day is so important. And I realize it's hard for them to, do the 5-step routine that I send them. I always will send them an email, the first treatment. But what I find beneficial is when they're able to hold on to one of them, they'd be like, oh, we started breathing today. I'm like, that's awesome. Keep doing it. And that's what we're going to focus on. And they start to pick and choose what they like the best and what helps them the best.
The habit stacking
Correct.
Approach. What is the first easiest step for you on this ongoing journey?
For myself?
No, for each patient. I mean, it's individual to the person. Yeah. So you kind of give them a menu, yes, and then they can play with it and say, okay, this is the thing that I do find myself actually adhering to. Like, great, like let's just focus there.
Yeah.
And then in a couple of weeks, we'll come back and see if we can put something else into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think naturally when the patients do come back, they'll talk about some type of imbalance. They'll probably feel good for a month or so, and then they're like, oh, I'm having trouble sleeping now. I'm like, okay, well, let's dive into that. Sleeping is so nuanced and it's difficult to treat, to be honest, because there's so many factors. And sometimes I ask them about their nightly routine. What is their sleep routine? Are they laying in bed on their phone before they try to shut their eyes? Are they doing anything to ground themselves before? And that's when, a new habit will be introduced. I would suggest, okay, can you turn off screens 30 minutes before bed? Can you drink a tea before bed? Can we cut out a glass of wine tonight and just make it attainable for them and not make it too difficult? Because when you throw, 10 things at a person to do, they're not going to do most of it or any of it. They like, one thing that they can actually track themselves and see a difference with.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing that we try to focus on in general is don't worry about perfect, because the gap between 0 and this first step, the impact is way bigger than from the 99th step to the 100th step, right? That first one is where the biggest impact comes. So let's just figure out how to get that first one that you can stick with.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes even just coming into clinic and taking and carving out time in their day is step one, because it takes a lot of time. I mean, in LA, it takes you 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, depends where you're coming from, to get to clinic. There's traffic, it's stressful, and you have to carve it out of your day. And, I'm not open all evenings. And so sometimes they have to carve it out of their actual work day. And that in itself is rewarding. And, I always tell my patients, you should be proud of yourself that you chose to do this today.
Yeah, you've made a commitment
Correct.
To your health just by being here.
Absolutely.
To go back, I know we've talked about recovery and sleep. You mentioned that you make like a food a food system or program for your patients. Is that inspired by the way you eat? Is it inspired by what you're educated in? If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I think the core basis is of Chinese nutrition and how our bodies are meant to eat as warm-blooded animals. And I think the premise of Chinese food therapy is eating warm and cooked foods. I think we're in a stage, especially in LA, where, we're pumped with a ton of nutrients, where salads are amazing, smoothies are amazing because you're able to put in fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, which is so great. Yes, you get the B vitamins, the vitamin C, the vitamin K, the E from all these vegetables, but can your body truly process it? Because our gut is warm. And so how Chinese medicine sees it is that it's tied to our spleen. Our spleen is such an important organ of digestion and food and how it processes food. But if you put something cold or raw in your body, your spleen is working on overdrive to first warm it and then to process the nutrients. And so when it's working on overdrive and doing this two-step process over, I don't know how many years people will have salads and smoothies every single morning, it's going to get weaker and weaker and weaker. And that's when you'll see, the 10 symptoms that I recognize as a practitioner of a spleen qi deficiency. That's when someone will start to feel fatigue. That's when, someone might start to gain weight or have some phlegm buildup or have a fluid imbalance and some edema. I always go back to, what are you eating? What is your breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And something I always ask all my patients.
That's super interesting. And I guess when you eat warm foods, I feel like a lot of typical go-to foods, like you said, are like these raw and again, cold foods. Like for breakfast, knowing I'm a smoothie person, so what would the ideal warm food breakfast, what would that be?
Yeah, definitely high in protein. So every day I always have eggs in the morning, paired with avocado, some greens, whether there's some herbs. And I always make sure I take it out of the fridge 30 minutes before so it's not cold. Or I'll stir fry some vegetables to create that warmth. Oatmeal is great, or some grains. Porridge, we always say Chinese porridge is awesome. We call it juk in Cantonese. Exactly, congee. And put ginger in it. Yeah, and even if it's hard to do it with rice, I've liked to do a savory oatmeal. So, a quick oats, making sure it's organic and clean, putting a little bit of water, chicken broth in it. I put a little bit of sesame oil, crack an egg in there, some scallion, cilantro, and it's delicious. Black sesame.
You're making me hungry.
Wow. Yeah. I need to write this down.
And it's nourishing and it's yummy and it's quick and easy. And I always suggest savory first thing in the morning because of the glucose spikes and how our body can actually process the protein and give us energy for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that protein side. And then it sounds with avocado, you try to get some fat balance in with the protein. Warm. Okay.
Correct.
And then, can you take us through a full day of food? Okay. So we have this warm kind of protein led breakfast. Yeah. What would the rest look like?
Of course. I understand salads are so easy because they're quick. And I think in this fast pace, you pick one up, you chop it up. But I think I realized with time, stir fries are really easy as well. I like to blanch things. I like to also prep cook. So for example, for lunch, the day before, I'll blanch, broccoli, asparagus, peppers. So they're a little bit cooked, but I can still use them in a salad. Keep them in the fridge overnight, take them out in the morning so they're not cold. And that's what I use. It's already cooked. It's quick. And that's when I add some dressing. I love sesame oil, sesame seeds, lemon, some type of vinegar. If I can have a protein, it's a lot of leftovers, slice up chicken. I'm a huge fan of red meat and beef because it's so, so powerful and wonderful for our blood. And it's something that I always like to suggest to patients because when someone's vegetarian or vegan, that's when a lot of health issues come to rise.
That must be, yeah, you see Taylor smiling there.
I'm so excited. I'm a huge meat. I'm made a whole transition to red meat. And I felt all the things you're saying with blood flow, female health, everything in my life has changed. And even the idea of being anemic, this just connected a lot. And I feel seeing it through your lens, it actually is more digestible because trying to think it through in the Western lens, it's I'm not supposed to eat this, but it's actually so nourishing. So that's
absolutely. And it's all about balance really. And back to the whole red meat and why it is important. It's because it's the meat that has the most heme iron. It's how our body can actually process the iron, right? And back to women's health, when we lose blood every month, the most important time to boost that blood up is once you're done with your period. It's that week. And so that's when I tell my patients, drink bone broth, make your own bone broth, or go buy, clean bone broth. Like, Thrive Market has great bone broth. Kettle Fire at Whole Foods is amazing and clean, and drink it. But, you don't have to eat a whole steak. It's about the consistency, and even having like a sliver of a grass-fed, grass-finished piece of meat every single day for a week. It's less about the protein content, but more about the nutrients that your body is getting from it. And there's only so much your body can intake. If someone has, an 8-ounce piece of steak every single day, yes, it's yummy and nutrients when you talk about the actual protein content, but about the vitamins and the B vitamins and iron that you're able to extract from that. There's only so much your body can take in.
And then, so we talked through breakfast, lunch, dinner. Do you have people eat differently because you're preparing for sleep? I don't know if that digestion, everything, I imagine, plays into that.
Yeah. So for dinner, I always personally and like to suggest if you can eat before 7 o'clock, it's really important, because you do need that time where your digestion isn't working before sleep. Because when you're eating close to bed, your energy is focused in your gut and digestion and not focused on helping you sleep. Your body is still active, and it keeps you in that sympathetic state where, your body's still moving. And when you sleep, you have to be on the other side of that nervous system. That's from like a Western perspective. And from a Chinese Eastern perspective, again, organ times, certain times of the evening and the night is where your organs can detox. But when everything's focused on the spleen, which is usually the prime times are in the morning, that's when the body starts to flip-flop and imbalances start to happen.
You're very thoughtful on the nutrients you're getting from the food you're consuming, but you did do some supplementation, whether it's the magnesium side or some of the patented Chinese.
Sure.
Are there any others? Do you do anything, any protein powders to ensure you get a certain amount in a day, or creatine or anything like that you incorporate?
I do not. I believe that the best amount or the way that you can extract from food is the best. Eating is the best way you can actually get the nutrients. And yes, sometimes people do need the protein if they work out a lot, if they want to build muscle. It's very necessary, but it's not necessary to create longevity and health and vitality. And that's, I think, a key differentiation of what you truly need in your body. You don't need that much. You just need to eat whole foods, clean foods 3 times a day, making sure that your body is nourished. Yeah, and it's as simple as that.
I like that. I like that sentiment. And it kind of connects to like the mindset thing too. Like people get so inundated with, having to follow a certain thing or having to try the newest supplement. So I guess how do you find that the, connection between Chinese medicine and what you do in acupuncture really helps, change people's mindsets and, if anything, for the better for longevity, but also their approach to their personal health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when they are introduced to Chinese medicine, they're given a new perspective of what health can be. When we think about this medicine, it started 3,000 years ago in China. We're not in that same day and age. What you can get back then, how you had to forage for food, how all the herbs are natural, how all the food you get is seasonal, is so important. And how we can transfer that to modern day is important as well. For example, the best foods for you are seasonal foods. It's the vegetables that are grown at this time of the year, because that's how you get most of the nutrients and how it balances your body energetically. And I think a lot of patients they learn how to be more in tune with nature. And Chinese medicine is a nature medicine. It's really about being a nature being and being in tune with the cycles of Earth, the sun, the moon, nighttime, daytime, weather, seasons, everything. And so I think it just makes them more mindful of where they are in this time and place.
When you put it that way, it makes so much sense. Each of us are such a small piece of this ecosystem, and the seasonality and the temperature changes and the spinning of the earth and the circadian rhythm. All of that comes into play. You would think that we properly adapted our own digestion and everything around it as opposed to the other way around.
Absolutely. And, for example, during the colder months, during the shift in the time, when it's colder, during winter time, people are usually more tired and they don't have, the energy or the physical energy and mental to do and be as productive as they are during the summertime. I'm like, that's okay. That's your body telling you need to rest. but we're so used to being in this, one dimensional, okay, we're working every single day, 9 to 5, and this is how we're supposed to work. Yeah, it's interesting just seeing the balance and what makes sense for people.
Yeah, I mean, as two former competitive athletes that are probably still kind of competitive, just not at the same level as we were, that idea of taking off on the fitness side probably is a little tougher for us.
Yes.
What is your routine like? Because you say the winter months and everything, but you're in LA where it's kind of just perfect all the time.
Yeah.
So what's your fitness routine like? How do you think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I was also an athlete through high school and through college, and movement was so important. And I went through my own journey of what made sense for my body. And during COVID, when things were slower, I worked out probably 5-6 times a week. And, after 6 months of that, a year of that, I realized that was not meant for my body. My hormones started to change. I realized I was getting more blood deficient. That, I never took lab tests, but my B vitamins were probably low. My iron was probably low. My ferritin was probably out of whack as well. And so then I started to change my workout, started reducing it and doing a lot more slower, we say yin exercises, whether it's yoga, walking, Pilates, and, maybe now twice a week, that's when I do the more intense HIIT workouts or heavy weights. But I like to always make sure 3 times a week I'm doing some type of yoga, walking, or Pilates, and meditation is always included before or after.
Knowing like you also kind of focus on women's health specifically, like do you find that you kind of follow that cycle syncing kind of intuitively? Because I feel like you're in touch with your body, you kind of know.
Yeah, of course. It's interesting because cycle syncing is a huge buzz and there's a lot of research and a lot of different perspectives, but I like to see it from a Chinese medicine perspective. When you are on your cycle and you are bleeding, your body and your energy is all focused in your uterus. It's helping with the, regeneration of tissues in your lining. It's focused on what it's trying to expel and detox. And so when your energy is focused there, you're already qi and blood deficient. And so if you're working out extra when you're on your period, you're going to be weaker and get weaker. And that's why people get injuries. There's research that's saying that ACL injuries are the highest when women are in their period. It's when people feel sick when they work out on their period. And that's something that I have changed where if I'm feeling tired on my cycle, I don't work out. I'll maybe stretch, for a little bit, do very gentle yoga, maybe go for a walk if I'm feeling it. But if not, it's, my body telling myself that I need to rest. And this is my time to recover, because if I do something that's too intense, it could make me sick afterwards or make me sick in the long run.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something, again, like as a former athlete, like unlearning, like you got to push yourself, even if, you didn't have a choice. And like, it's so nice. And the same thing with COVID, like finding that what works for your body is just so important.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a bunch of different modalities between Tai Chi and yoga, the HIIT, walking, stretching. Do you do most of it on your own, or do you go to studios or classes?
I love classes. When I can, I'll go to a reformers Pilates class. Sometimes I'll do, some type of HIIT. There's a class in LA called Bunda. It's cardio and weights. It's very much focused on the lower body and glutes. It's, there's only women in the class, but it's amazing. But you're on the Stairmaster and that's your cardio. And then the weights, it's all heavy weights. It's about form. It's slower. I love those classes. Recently, I've been really busy in clinic. And so most of the workouts I just do at home. And I think I've been grateful and lucky where I know the repertoire of how to use weights, of how to understand my body because of being an athlete. So it's easier for me to just pick up, weights and make my own workout for the day.
So you don't do a virtual class. You just kind of read your body, what equipment you have, and you say, okay, here's.
Most of the time, yes. Sometimes if I'm just, I don't want to think about it or sit down and write something down. There's so many Instagram influencers actually throughout COVID that posted so many videos. And I have, on my saved folder in Instagram, probably like 500 workout videos. And so if I'm tired in the morning, I'll be like, okay, today's arms and abs day. Let me go find an arms and abs, let me, today's lower body. Let me find a lower body. Do I want it to be a Pilates focus or do I want it to be heavy weights? And that's really easy for me too. So it's a balance of videos that are already made and sometimes I repeat them or whether I want to do my own thing.
Yeah, the volume of quality content that came out of COVID, one of our prior guests was actually the yoga instructor, my yoga instructor through COVID that I still have on my computer. And that's my go-to at home yoga is still her stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I still hang on to that. It's funny, when I open a video, they're just like, yeah, it's Christmas 2020.
Right.
Oh my goodness. What a different time. But I still do those workouts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What equipment do you keep at home to have that flexibility? You mentioned some weights.
Yeah. I have, a yoga mat. It's the core. Sometimes I don't even use weights because it's not always necessary. I love a booty band. I have a small weight rack, 5 pounds, 7.5, 10, 12, 15, and then 20. And that's the highest it goes at home. I have yoga blocks. I have a Pilates ring, a Pilates ball, and that's the equipment I have.
Yeah. But I mean, with that, you can improvise all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And I love it. It's sometimes I wake up and I'm a morning workout person where I'm just like, what am I feeling today? What does my body feel? And how do I feel? Am I sore? Is today a yoga stretching day or is today a Pilates day? What makes sense?
Yeah, we were just touching on these classes from COVID because we're all locked up, right? And so we're having to do stuff virtually. And the one pillar in HealthSpan that I think a lot of people are having a harder time with, given what we came out, is that social connection side, that social connection and purpose. You're so busy in clinic with what you're doing and then trying to take care of your own health. How do you think about deliberately cultivating that practice in your own life, getting that social connection side?
It's interesting because I'm naturally an extrovert. I get fueled by interactions with people. And recently I was actually debriefing with my husband. I'm just like, oh my goodness, like I really only see you sometimes. And that's special, and that's when I'm just like, okay, we need to do date night. Let's find quality time together. But really finding balance and being okay with not working. And I think that's especially as a business owner and a new business owner and someone who's so passionate about my medicine, to be okay with not seeing patients for a day and blocking out my schedule. And that's when I'll be like, okay, that's when I'll go do a workout with a friend. And that's how I see her. This is when I'll get lunch with someone else. And so I have one day of where I'm like, this is where I have time to do what I want, to be fueled by interactions. And I love, I don't go out anymore. I like to sleep by 10 o'clock. My whole lifestyle at night has changed since being a practitioner. So I crave the, one night a week, game night, just have people come over, all my close friends. And, it's great. I get to sleep early. Everyone comes to my home. It's easy for me. We have fun. And it's wonderful.
What are some of the go-to games?
Ooh, I love Catan.
Okay. I play a lot of that with my daughter, actually. Yeah.
It's amazing. There's a card game also called Exploding Kittens.
Yeah.
And it can really a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Then Monikers.
I don't know that one. I'll have to check it out.
It's a salad bowl. It's also called Salad Bowl.
Yeah. Okay. Because that one you don't even need to buy a board game. Like you just write on pieces of paper.
And it's so easy and we can do it anywhere, everywhere. And it's a lot of fun.
I guess outside of your own life, like knowing you have, a community on Instagram, like how do you find yourself interacting with your followers? Like, do you find that you've connected people through your services or anything like that?
Absolutely. I'm so grateful for Instagram as a means to share the medicine. And most people who follow, I think, are brought to this medicine for the first time by seeing my videos, and they get curious. They're like, wow, that acupressure point really helped with my constipation. This helped with my stress. And they were able to take charge of their health. They were able to see a difference with, a little pressure point or a few minutes of doing something. And so then I think they get primed to trying to understand the medicine more. So a lot of people will comment and I try to respond to as many comments as I can. Some people will message me and sometimes I don't see it just because it's in flood of, in my inbox. But what I like to do sometimes on my story is saying, what are some questions? And I'll look through to see what the general questions are. And then I'll post on my story answering that. And I think the interaction is important. People like to get their answers answered. But in general, when it's more specific, when someone sends me like a long DM about their health, for me, it almost is a disservice to them if I say, hey, like this point will work, because in reality, there's not one point that's going to help their long list of issues. And I like to spend at least 45 minutes with someone over a virtual consultation, if they do choose to do that, to say, hey, like, I want to hear everything about you. Let me see what I can do to help you, because that's the only way I can really figure out what the root cause of their issue is. It's not, a 2-paragraph DM. Or if they're in LA, I encourage them to come to clinic because that's how I can best help them, because they also get the acupuncture.
So if they're 1,000+ miles away, they've seen your content. Okay, this I've tried this on myself. It's really good. How? Because it seems like there can be wide variation of quality of service. So if they're in Ames, Iowa, or they're in Greenville, North Carolina, how do you help them or recommend that they go about finding the right practitioner for them?
Absolutely. I mean, because it's such a creative medicine, it's, it's so varied. The easiest way that I share with my people asking is there's a National Association of Acupuncture, and everyone who practices in the US has to take a licensing exam. And then therefore, you're under the directory of the National Association of Acupuncture. So then for me, I'm just like, I know that they had to do some type of education. That's at least, I went through 4 years of education for Chinese medicine school. Whether they did 3 to 4, I know that they did that. I know that they, spent grueling hours studying for this exam, and they know the basis of it. Then to me, I'm just like, okay, then they are probably okay, and they're probably great. But again, it's individualistic. Do they want to see male or female? Do they want to see someone who, specializes in a type of acupuncture, who, usually sees women's health patients, who focuses on orthopedics and recovery? And that's when they have to do some of their research.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the Instagram stories where you ask people like what their questions are, do you find there's a lot of like themes or like common ailments or like complaints that people are having that like recurring every week or whatever case you do it?
Back pain, neck pain, insomnia, anxiety, depression, strangely a lot of tinnitus and like ear ringing, dizziness. I think I listed most of the ones that people have asked for videos to be made about it.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's interesting. I thought gut health was going to be, I feel like everyone complains about like some form of gut health, but knowing a lot of it's sometimes connected to anxiety.
Everything else. It's interesting because based on my demographics, about 40% of my followers are the US, but 60% are everywhere else in the world. And it made me think the other day, gut health is so important and it's so prominent and prevalent here in the USA, but what about the rest of the world? Is it similar? Because we're eating different foods, the way that foods are processed here, whether it's genetically modified or made for factory standards. I grew up in Hong Kong and I didn't develop any gut issues until I moved to the USA. And so to my, I'm just like, whoa, what's happening? There's an imbalance and I'm not used to eating the food here, whether it's because of soil, which could be a whole nother conversation, and the nutrients that's actually in the food.
Yeah. I mean, my mom had colon cancer and when she travels, her digestive issues are fine. But when she's in the country, it's a total bad. It's just absolutely awful. Yeah. I wonder, I mean, to Taylor's point of how prevalent gut health issues are and how it's not on your list of things coming up, if it's almost a missed opportunity. It's like the algorithm assumes it's physical, back pain, neck pain. That's what acupuncture is for. So that's what ends up showing in people's feed that are interested in that, without realizing, oh no, here are the things that it could do for gut health as well. And here's, treating your IBS or your constipation, whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because most of my patients that come to clinic, I always ask about their gut. Their bloating is the first thing that I ask about. Their stools. I like to know the quality of the stools, how many times they go, because it's so indicative of what's happening in their body. So naturally, it's what I do in clinic. But I think because it's very saturated on Instagram, not just from a Chinese medicine perspective, but from a Western perspective of, glutathione or all these supplements that are good for your gut, prebiotic, a probiotic, or a spore-based probiotic, what is right for you? And it's hard to navigate.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and thank you so much for the time today. That is very much the purpose of what we're doing with the show, is trying to help people navigate this in a much cleaner way. Yes. Instead of going and I get 350 million results on what the potential issue is, holding up these role models that have gone on this journey, are on this journey, are very thoughtful about it, very well educated on it, and hearing the things that they're doing. So thank you for sharing that today.
Of course, you're so welcome. I feel like we could chat about health for hours because it's something I'm passionate about and something you guys are passionate about too. But again, thank you for your time.
And to that end, is there anyone you would recommend we should be speaking to and have on the show?
Ooh, Yeah, I can email you. I want to think about a few and
Okay.
then I'll recommend it and send it your way for sure.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
It was so lovely meeting you both today.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time and sharing your
Of
story.
course.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Home of Healthspan podcast. And remember, you can always find the products, practices, and routines mentioned by today's guests, as well as many other Healthspan role models on alively.com. Enjoy a lively day.